Mike. Toronto. VK on the beat. Check. I'm in Toronto where you wanna get the city love. I'm from Toronto where you wanna get the city love. I'm in Toronto like we wanna get the city love. My city love me back for my city love. I'm in Toronto where you wanna get the city love.
Welcome to episode 1620 of Toronto Mic'd, proudly brought to you by Great Lakes Brewery, a fiercely independent craft brewery who believes in supporting communities, good times, and brewing amazing beer. Order online for free local home delivery in the GTA. Palma Pasta. Enjoy the taste of fresh, homemade Italian pasta and entrees from Palma Pasta in Mississauga and Oakville. RecycleMyElectronics.ca. Committing to our planet's future means properly recycling our electronics of the past. Building Toronto's Skyline, a podcast and book from Nick Iones from Fusion Corp. And Ridley Funeral Home, pillars of the community since 1921. Joining me today, making his Toronto Mic'd return, is Toronto City Councillor Brad Bradford. Welcome back, Brad.
Great to be here with you. Good morning, Mike. Good to be in Etobicoke.
Good to have you here. Did you take my advice and go by the moniker Rad Brad? Because if I were a Brad, I'd be wanting people to call me Rad Brad.
You know what? If you tune in online, people call me a lot of different things. So,
okay, well, we're going to talk about that. So I'm excited to have you back, and we're going to have a great chat. If people want to hear your Toronto Mic'd debut, it was a day you'll never forget, right, Brad? It was June 2023.
1069 or something?
1269. Close. Okay. Only 200 off there, but who's counting? Okay. It was episode 1269, and I chatted with you because at that time, Brad, you were campaigning to be Toronto's mayor.
That's right. Yeah, that was happening then.
So that came like just before the 2023 by-election for mayor, which Olivia Chow won. And Olivia Chow got like 269,000 votes. And then FOTM Anna Bailao got like 235,000 votes. And you finished 8th with about 9,000 votes and change. And I'm wondering if you could, right off the top, what did you learn from that experience, being a councillor running for mayor, not winning, but being able to just pick up where you left off as councillor?
Well, that was pretty sweet, wasn't it? You don't get a lot of those opportunities to kind of take a shot and then continue to in the capacity of councillor. So that was unique circumstances, and I think everybody can agree the 23 mayoral by-election was the election none of us saw coming. But it was a great experience, right? You don't let defeat define you. You are always learning, and there's lots of lessons learned when you lose. But really, it was an opportunity to go all across Toronto, 640 square kilometers, and hear from people about their hopes, their aspirations, their concerns, their challenges. I learned a lot about campaigns. People will tell you that winning the mayoralty in Toronto is one of the most difficult elections to win in the country because you're effectively campaigning in 25 federal ridings. Right. So, from a communications perspective, the messages that you have in Etobicoke might be different than in Scarborough or North York or downtown, but you need to knit that together with an overarching vision for the city. The ground game, if you're going to try and stand one up, that is very difficult across a city the size of Toronto. So to get into the brass tacks of politics, you'd want to have ward captains pulling votes in each one of those 25 wards. You're trying to identify supporters and all that stuff that, typically would take place over a 6-month campaign in a municipal context was expedited for the by-election. It was a shorter run. So I think what you saw happen was the candidate that had the most name rec, universal name rec, which is Mayor Olivia Chow. Right. She kind of rose to the top there, to her credit. She was supported by what is effectively a political party at City Hall, Progress Toronto. They had organizers. They had been building lists, working with volunteers, putting all that together for the past 8 years. So when the election was called, all that was available. And then you had a ballot that was split with 101 other candidates running, on the ticket. And the results were the results.
But it did. It was a catalyst for you to finally make your Toronto Mike debut.
It
So
was, yeah.
put that in the positive.
Long-time
column.
listener, first-time caller. It was. We reached out and you were super gracious about that. Yeah, sure. Come on the pod.
Of
I think
course.
you said at the time, I don't ask politicians to come
I
on
still
the pod.
don't.
Right. Okay.
I still don't. Active politicians, I never invite them on. But if an active politician reaches out and says, "Hey, would you chat with?" Like it's usually like their office, but would you chat with? Like Charlie Angus had somebody reach out and say, "Would you talk to Charlie?" And I said, "Yeah, I would talk to Charlie. Like I would like to talk to Charlie Angus."
He's a cool guy.
Absolutely, like he's like a punker from the '80s, and it. I just talked to Greg Keeler, and he was part of that scene on Queen Street in the '80s. We're too young, Brad, to maybe have been participating, but it's like fascinating to me.
Well, speak for yourself. I'm.
How old are you, Brad Bradford? Is that public record?
Yeah, 38. So 1986.
Okay, yeah. So you were in diapers.
Yeah, I wasn't participating, but I just like to point out and
You were around for the
particularly-
80s.
Yeah, I was here in the 80s, and I wish I actually got to enjoy that more fully.
86. Okay, so when I drop references to the drive of '85, I have to take a mental note that Brad wasn't watching when George Bell was on his knees catching that fly ball. So I'll have to take that note. But okay, so a few things. Like there's a lot of ground I want to cover with you here, and you have somebody with you who I do want to chat with in a moment. Heather Purdon, which is a name. Like I just met Heather for the first time at the door. But I know the name Heather Purdon because I've had on this program people like Mike Stafford. I think 4 times he's dropped by. And I'm going to talk to Heather in just a moment, but you mentioned that the 2023 by-election is the election that nobody saw coming. And just last week, Alan Gregg was over here. And Alan Gregg managed John Tory's political career. He told me, we were talking about this, the 4 words that nobody thought to string together, John Tory sex scandal. Like these are,
that.
nobody... So Alan Gregg, firstly, I'm just saying to listenership, like Alan Gregg's episode is epic, next level. Listen to Alan Gregg. But he was a shock. Like, he still can't believe that by the book Tory would make such a misstep. Nobody saw that coming.
Yeah, I mean that was the resignation.
You were as surprised as anybody.
Yeah, I was floored. Yeah, it was surprising. It was shocking. It's people's personal business is their personal business, but obviously he felt he needed to resign. And again,
yeah, but you would agree with me. I think that we didn't want him to resign because he had a consensual affair with a younger person. Like that's not the reason. I think we wanted him to resign. I think it's because it was a city hall staffer. Well, I was mayor of the city.
Well, I would actually say I was not in the he needed to resign camp at all. So we might disagree on that.
Right.
But yeah, no, that was obviously a personal decision for him, and I think part of that was probably family considerations and not wanting to have to air all that stuff out.
He probably felt some shame.
Well, and if you stayed on, those questions wouldn't have gone away. You would have had to address it in perhaps more of a fulsome way, and that would have been pretty uncomfortable. So it's his personal call, but obviously as someone who doesn't necessarily agree with the direction of the current administration on a lot of different things, although some things we do agree on. I look at where we are right now, and I worry about the direction the city's headed in, and if you go back to the by-election, that's kind of how we got here.
Well, we're going to cover that ground, and you did say the words Progress Toronto, and I want to get back to that too. But I do want to say hello to Heather Purdon. So hello, Heather.
Hi, thanks for having us, I guess. Me?
Very good. No, our mics aren't as good as the 640 mics, so you got to get closer. They're more
Up close and
unidirectional. There you're
personal, like this.
beautiful.
There.
Yeah. There's Heather there. So nice to finally meet you.
Yeah. I feel like we've known each other forever, but not really.
Well, the name Heather Purdon is legendary in the Toronto radio landscape
you're too
here.
kind, yeah.
So just a couple of quick notes before we get back to Brad. But you were a producer at AM 640.
Yes, I was.
So what shows would you produce? I know you produced Mike Stafford's show.
Yes, most recently I produced for Greg Brady in the morning since February. I've produced for many people: Mike Stafford, Matt Gurney, Supriya Dwivedi, Alex Pearson.
Everyone you named has been in this basement except Supriya gave me a very polite.
No,
I'm not visiting your basement.
Yeah. not surprised. And I love that for her.
And it's fine. Like I get that once in a while, but as long as you're polite about it, it's like
she's amazing.
I'm not going to kidnap you and drag you into the basement here. But okay, so have you had any contact with Mike Stafford since he in the last little while?
No, I haven't talked to Mike maybe in about a year or two. Maybe like comment on a Facebook status but no, I think he's pretty involved with his family, taking time to himself. So no, I haven't talked to him.
Did you hear his visits, the 2 visits post chorus?
I've heard 2 of them. Yes,
yeah,
I
there's
have.
only been 2. Mm-hmm. Okay. So let's just learn right now, why did you leave your production job at Chorus?
Yeah, it was really hard to leave. I was there for 13 years. And just the state of radio, I saw the future was not looking so hot.
Especially at Chorus.
Yeah. And just there's not really much movement a producer can do. Like once you're on the morning show or the afternoon drive, what's the next step? Didn't want to be a manager of any sort. Not really any positions available. So, and this is where Brad comes in. Brad was a weekly panelist on our station, and I had a good relationship with him. And I thought, you know what?
So did Brad tap you on the shoulder, or did you say, hey, Brad, I'm looking to make a move. Is there anything shaking over there at City Hall?
I kind of caught him by surprise. I was like, hey, Brad, do you have time to meet for a coffee? And he was like, okay. And then here we are.
And he said, I like the cut of your jib.
Yeah, I think so. Something like that.
Quote?
Yeah. Yeah.
It sounds like something I could say, yeah.
People born in 1886, they say cut of your jib.
92 over here, so.
Okay, you know what? I can't even talk to you about the first World Series and the second World Series. My goodness gracious. What will we talk about? Can't even talk about Pearl
Spice
Jam's
Girls.
10. Spice Girls, okay.
Yeah.
I got to, tell me what you want, what you really, really want.
Yes,
okay,
amazing.
So any regrets? How long have you been working for Brad?
Just about 4 months now. And no, it feels like I
look me in the eyes.
look you in the eye or him in the eye?
No, me, because I need to know.
No regrets.
Is it good working for Brad Bradford?
Yeah, I have a lot of fun. We get to do fun things like this.
This is hilarious. I did not
I
know
feel
this
like-
was happening.
Well, I did, because you know what happened? You were scheduled for 10 o'clock, Mr. Bradford, and I was preparing for the 10 o'clock visit, and then I got a nice text from Heather that you were running a little late. And then I think I said fashionably late, and I think I said something like, okay, I'll allow this, but I do want a few minutes off the top with you. And then we made like a deal.
Yep.
Because I'm a master negotiator.
Yeah, it was pretty easy. Yeah.
Maybe soon I'll be working for Brad Bradford.
All you just got to ask.
Do you have any more any more jobs over there? Okay. Goodness gracious. So no regrets.
No.
Yeah, and Chorus, of course, people who know that they're in huge financial troubles over there. They're cutting costs everywhere. So it's not like it's a place you want to be if you're looking for a future. I think it's a tough place to be.
Well, like the people were so amazing, so that was really hard to leave them. And just doing radio work itself was really fun. But getting up at 4
I was
in the
dear
morning-
friends with Pete Kick's brother.
Oh, I
you
know
know
Pete
Pete Kick?
Kick. Yes, I do. Yeah.
Okay.
He's a Etobicoke guy too, isn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he's
Look at us name dropping.
He's a proud conservative voter too, as well as I recall. But anyway, so there we go. Heather Purdon just made her Toronto Mic debut
And podcast debut.
Is that right?
Yeah.
I'm shocked by that. My mind is blown right now. Okay, so I'm honored that you did it here. And thank you for that. And I will just ask you one last question, Heather, and then it's going to be all Brad the rest of the way. That's what, we're all here for the Brad show here. But would Brad Bradford have been, if he had a 10 o'clock on CBC, let's say Metro Morning with FOTM David Common, and Brad Bradford at a 10 o'clock, would he have arrived at 10:20?
Well, CBC would have had him ready for 9:30, so no, he would not be late.
So it's my fault because I didn't tell him to be here at 9:30.
And they're just extra cautious, those ones. So
Just was checking in on that because I know you work closely with Brad. Okay, your mic will stay open if you ever want to say anything or correct anything. As I turn my
no, it's the Rad Brad show now.
yeah. So you're gonna stick with that? I think Rad Brad is how I would brand him. We're working on that one.
Different
okay.
strokes for different folks. I would just say on the tardiness, my goal for 2024 New Year's resolution was to be more on time. So that's not on time all the time. It's more
But that's for
on time,
2024,
less late, right? But what I would say this morning, we are dealing with, and don't worry, I've already had hand, foot, and mouth disease, but we've got the HFM. With the toddler and a little chaotic this morning running the kids around. So this is CBC would have had to deal with
This
that
is where
too.
kids come in handy.
And it's also where balancing the sort of everything on the home front. Sometimes you got to be
How
there.
old is this child of yours now?
So yesterday, shout out to Briar. She turned 4, January 28th.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And then the other one, Bronwyn, is 19 months.
Okay, so I've been there, like twice I've been there actually with
Right.
that same kind of age gap. And yeah, it's like, so that's a nice segue because I wanted to ask you about, the work-life balance being a city councillor. And I just had over here Amber Morley. So, and Amber she can waltz over here, okay? So she's got no excuse for being late. She can walk over here. She doesn't live too far. But Amber Morley dropped by and she told me, like, very, very honestly, that she was trying to do less because she was burning out. Like, she was in real danger of burning out, and she was seeking this work-life balance. And I mean, you're a young man. You're a fit guy. We'll talk about the cycling in a minute. But Amber's even younger than you.
Amber's been a nice addition to council. We've talked about that candidly, and I've had those conversations with some of the other newly elected class of 22. So I'm class of 2018 for the listeners.
Right.
That's when I first showed up. But we got Amber Morley and Chris Moyes and Jamal Myers and a handful of others that joined us in 22. And I think it is a huge adjustment. And you talk about the wards, you're operating local government services in a federal riding. We've got constituencies. Amber, I think, has one of the biggest ones, but we're all roughly around 120,000 people. And so when you look at the jurisdiction, federal government dealing with, CRA and immigration, so those are not necessarily calls that you're making to your local MP on an everyday basis.
Right.
Provincial, ODSP, maybe some education stuff. Again, not a lot of interface necessarily. But everything else, from getting your kids into swimming lessons to potholes to picking up the dead raccoons off the road, that's local government. That's where the rubber hits the road. So the volume is significant. The schedule can be very intense, and it doesn't easily lend itself to family or personal time. I've been trying to balance that by just doing it as a family. And so my girls are getting a great sort of civic education to the degree that they're picking it up as a 4-year-old, but they're coming out and we're hitting the bouncy castles and painting the faces. And, people are always able to grab me in the community and tell me what's up.
So you're holding up okay. No danger of burning out.
No. I mean, I love it. I love the intensity. I love working with people. I love hearing.
You're like, give me more.
Yeah. Like pile it on, got the broad shoulders, happy to do the work. And, that's what you have to keep in mind is, it is, it's a challenging and demanding job, but it's an honor to have it. So I'm not going to have this forever, and it's a privilege each day. And you think about what can I get done in the day that's in front of me and how can I make a difference?
You're the richest man in town.
Yeah, not financially, no, but like a rich life. It's very rewarding.
Now, okay, you mentioned some things that are, local government, picking up the dead raccoons, swimming lessons. Look, I'm old. This is how old I am, Brad. I'm old enough to remember when bike lanes were a local government decision. That's how old I am.
What's the applause or the laugh track or something?
I think I have one.
Yeah.
Hold on.
Hey.
Well, it's something like that, or is it?
Yeah,
Okay,
there it is.
Well, I got a few things here. That's for my morning zoo show that I do earlier in the morning. But okay, so you're a dad, you're a city councillor, but you're also a cyclist. Like, you do winter cycling?
I do, yeah. I rode to City Hall yesterday. Yep.
And I follow you on Strava.
Check it on Strava.
I know. Of course, I checked in on you to make sure. Come on. I'm always checking in on my guests. So.
Yeah. No. Yeah, I ride a lot. I grew up doing two things. Figure skating was like the big sport of choice for a long time. And in the off season, I played rugby. And so, long story short, I ended up playing rugby in university and doing more of that. But I tore 4 ACLs, which is not.
Do you have 4 ACLs?
You start with 2, and then you keep replacing them. So I've got part of my hamstring in there. I've got part of my patella in there.
Wow.
And then most recently, I have a cadaver. I think they call it an allograft, but a tendon off of somebody's outside of their foot is in my right knee. And so anyways, I'm all put back together.
They rebuilt you.
But the point is, cycling is a nice sport because it's linear in the knee motion. There's no pivoting. And I kind of got hooked on that, got into bike racing, took that to a pretty high level here in North America. I was living down in Boston at the time, racing all over.
How long do you live in Boston?
3 years. Yeah. So about 3 years, I was doing renewable energy policy work at a nonprofit and racing bikes in the evenings and on the weekends. And all that is to say, You know, I'm a commuter by bike, probably 75% of the time into City Hall. It's about 8.5K from my place at Danforth and Woodbine down to City Hall. I go across the Danforth bike lanes. I go down Sherbourne, bang a right on Wellesley, and then over on to Bay. It's a nice route. And, but I don't do it because I'm a zealot about cycling. It's not an ideological thing. It's like, I know if I'm going to be in a car, it's going to be a horror show with the traffic. And I know if I'm going to be on transit, probably 3 out of 4 times, I shouldn't say that, let's say 2 out of 5 times, there's going to be a disruption. So the bike is, I'm physically able to do it. It clears my head. I like that. I can listen to a podcast. And it's consistent. I know it's going to be 25 minutes.
Absolutely. As long as you don't pop a tire, you can. I know to the minute what time I'm arriving.
That's exactly it. You can time the lights, like all that stuff. So I love that. It works really well for me. It doesn't work for everybody, and it's not going to work for everybody. But you know, I think mobility in Toronto, just generally, it's about balance and trying to make sure that we've got viable options for everybody.
So yesterday I had a business coffee at where was I? Eglinton and Weston Road. Mount Dennis. Mm-hmm. And to me, I didn't even consider, I knew exactly what I was going to do. I was going to take my Royal York bike lane up to Eglinton, and then Eglinton's got a great bike lane that gets me to Weston. It was so slick, and I knew to the minute what time I was going to arrive. So I've got you. So on this note, so I knew you were coming over, and I'm like, okay, when did I see Brad Bradford last? Because you do come to TMLX events. By the way, I don't know if you're going to stick this in your calendar now, or if Heather's going to stick it in your calendar.
It'll be me.
Okay, so this is an important announcement for the listeners as well. So TMLX 18, that's the 18th Toronto Mike Listener Experience, is going to happen. I just confirmed the date with Great Lakes Brewery, who, by the way, have sent over fresh craft beer for you, Brad. And I got to get some for you too, Heather.
Oh, that would be perfect.
I'm going to get you some fresh craft beer from Great Lakes before you leave today.
Well, and you know what? Actually, next on the calendar is a little stop by to visit our friends over at GLB.
Really?
Pick up a couple more pints and say hi to Troy. So
okay.
Yeah. So we're big GLB fans.
And Troy's in your ride. Is it called a riding? Yeah. What do you call it?
It's called a ward, but you could say riding because it's the same boundaries. Yeah. He's an East Ender. Stamps his passport when he comes over here to work in Etobicoke. But he's a good friend, and you know. I'm obviously not a sponsored by GLB like you are, but I would just say the value on the tall boy here, the free delivery, the fantastic beer that tastes like beer, and that's a big thing for me. There's all these beers under the sun now that taste like fruit smoothies, etc. You can go to Great Lakes and you can get a beer that tastes like beer, which is what I like. Great value for money and free delivery. Tough to beat.
Look, you know what? You had me at hello. So Troy Birch, who I was texting with this morning, he's dropping by on Monday. But where was I going with that? Oh, yes. Okay. So this is the date. June 26, 2025, from 6 to 9 p.m., TMLX 18 at Great Lakes Brewery, which is 30 Queen Elizabeth Boulevard. Down the street from the Costco is how I usually tell people, but it's near Royal York and Queensway area. And everyone's invited, and the exciting news is not only will your first drink be on the house, and then, of course, it's a delicious fresh craft beer in the retail store there after that, but I have the exciting announcement that Palma Pasta is going to feed everybody. So if you like Italian food, Brad, you like Italian food?
I love it, and I love the Palma Pasta, and when we do the Toronto Mike Live over there in Mississauga, which is very far away, but it is worth it.
But you were there. Yeah. You were there in late November.
Yep. There for the friends and the free food.
Okay, so good. What a great segue. So I do have a frozen lasagna for you. Anthony Petrucci, whose family owns Palma Pasta, big Brad Bradford fan, and he phoned me after your first appearance, and he totally loved our initial chat. So
that's nice to hear. Well, thanks. And big fan of the Palma Pasta. This will feed my family for a couple. We'll get a couple nights out of this. If
there's
anyone who hasn't seen it, it's thick. It's thick.
Thick and delicious. And then, so you've got that. But now that you've mentioned your appearance at TMLX 17, which was at Palma's Kitchen in Mississauga, long way for you, we did a live recording. It's actually the only TMLX recording we do each year. So we'll be back there in I don't have a date yet, but late November or early December. We'll be back at Palma's Kitchen. But you were there. So when I saw you there, I said, hey, Brad, pop on the mic because I have a couple of open mics. And anybody who attends that event who wants on the mic, I put on the mic. Literally, you don't have to be Brad Bradford.
In fact, it's even better if you're not.
In fact, no one's going to throw tomatoes at you, maybe. Okay, right. So want to get this out of the way. This is for the FOTMs listening, and then we'll get back to everything you're up to at City Hall, and of course, we'll get back to the bike lanes and Bill 212 and all this stuff. But you came on the mic, and it was I think it was shortly after the Bill 212 passed, and I think City Council had some kind of, remind me, Brad, some vote about, like, do you approve of this provincial, because, I mean, you guys don't get a vote, but the MPPs voted to pass Bill 212. And I think there was something at City Council where, hey, do you approve of this? Am I right?
It's probably not approve. I'm sure it was a motion to oppose.
Oh, a motion to oppose.
Yeah.
You did not oppose Bill 212. So I had some questions about this because I know you're a cyclist. I'm a cyclist too. I happen to be a big fan of the bluer bike lanes. We'll get to that later. But we're having a little chat about that decision that it's imminent. I think there's a Cycle Toronto thing that needs to be addressed in, like, I feel like it's going to be addressed in April. I hope I'm doing this off the top of my head. But there is a Cycle Toronto thing about whether it, can you rip out these bike lanes? And I think that has to get addressed, like, legally. And then after that, I think they can send in the tanks or whatever they do when they get rid of these bike lanes, whatever Ford's going to do. But it's imminent. It's like whatever is going to happen, it's going to happen in the next few months. We'll get back to that. But I wanted to talk to you about it. And I need to know from your perspective. So you're on the mic. We're having this chat. My buddy Elvis is beside me. Like, when you're chatting, did you see somebody rush the stage, essentially? Like, were you paying attention when Alan Zweig, who's a great filmmaker, he's in attendance. I guess, I don't have to guess. He didn't like our conversation about bike lanes, and he was yelling at us from the audience. But you and I, with our headphones on, chatting, we don't hear this audience. Like, I didn't hear it.
Yeah.
Did you hear the yelling from the audience?
No, not really. There was a bit of a kerfuffle, and I wasn't familiar with this gentleman, and so I'm, I should be more familiar. That's on me. But he seemed to not like me. He seemed to not like politicians.
He doesn't like politicians.
And I wasn't sure if he liked bike lanes or didn't like bike lanes. Whenever you're an advocate, you got to have your key messages dialed in so that everybody understands it. So I'm actually not sure what his position was, although it did seem clear he wasn't, like, big on me.
I don't think he likes politicians. Like, my vibe was, it wasn't so much that you're Brad Bradford. It was more that we were talking about political stuff. Like, again, it's my show. Like, I'll talk about what I want to talk about with whom I want to talk about. And I think he, on some level, he completely does know that. But he was yelling at us to basically shut the fuck up, basically. He's yelling at us from the audience, but we don't hear it. So I guess to help us hear him, he literally, I have it on video, right? I had a camera. I have this video. He kind of he yells at us. He puts his hands on the table and he starts yelling at us. So I'm just curious, were you worried, like, for your, like, security at that point?
You know what? The Toronto Mike fam, I think, is pretty good, reasonable people here. So I actually never felt...
you never felt unsafe?
No, because you're not going to be there if you're that type of individual. It's a good crew, good loyal listeners, and whether or not people are Brad Bradford fans, a politician, like, I don't think anyone wants to go hands on. So I wasn't concerned about that, but
you weren't concerned.
I remember he went up afterwards and started sort of ranting.
Well, I did.
Maybe you got the audio.
I got
pulled.
a bit of a clip here.
And I don't even remember what he was saying, but I was kind of like, oh,
let's revisit it here, and then we'll get back
too.
to all the policy stuff here. But Alan Zweig did that. He rushed the thing, told us to basically, stop talking about bike lanes, basically. And then we finished our chat. And then I invited Alan to take your mic, basically. And then I put Katie Lohr on the other mic because Katie Lohr had produced and co-hosted a show with Alan Zweig that was on the Canada Land Network. It was called The Worst Podcast. So I had questions about that. Right. But we won't do that on this episode. Instead, I'm going to play 80 seconds from Alan Zweig and I here. Alan, you yelled at me, but no one could hear you because the mics weren't pointing in your direction.
I yelled at you because it was really boring and you let a politician, no offense, make a speech for 10 minutes on
probably closer to 5 minutes.
Fast talk, and on the other hand, I did understand what he was talking about, which I haven't understood a fucking thing since I got here. But I'll just say this. Thank God we have Doug Ford, whose decisions are all driven by data. It's not, you know what? People from Etobicoke are complaining about bike lanes, not because when they're on their bike, they hate being in the lane, but because when they're in their car, they hate that there's a bike lane. Yeah, big fucking deal. Anyway, yes.
Alan Zweig, everybody. So,
I drive too. Yes, it's harder to drive, but You know, I imagine a day when there are more bike lanes and they're all safe and there's lots of people driving bikes. And if it takes longer in your car, take the fucking TTC. That's what I say.
Honestly, words of wisdom. So, Alan.
But I'm not here to
No. First, I'm glad you're here.
dispute a politician.
I should have had I should have had Alan's wagon.
That would have been Langer Campbell sort of esque.
So there's before we pivoted to the worst podcast, and maybe that whole recording was the worst podcast, but that's what Alan said when I put him on the mic.
I love that. Rush the stage. Don't talk about fucking bike lanes. Proceed to talk about bike lanes. That was great.
Well, that was on me. I needed to know, why were you rushing the stage, Mr. Zweig? So, okay, so Alan's going to love the fact I played that clip. I'm sure I'll get a note like, thank you for playing that clip. And I say that with my sarcastically. But let's just address this now, like finish this little part. So, you're not opposed to ripping up the bluer bike lanes, and then it's more than that. There's University and there's Young. But please just remind me why you're not opposed to Bill 212.
I should have pulled this photo for you, but I think where the bike lanes are and how we put the bike lanes in and how effective they are is something that we need to monitor, something that we need to look at. I think that's like a practical approach to trying to balance the space within the street for all the different road users. So when you say Bloor, I want to sort of put some context around that. I'm specifically talking about the Bloor West extension, the Royal York area as you push out towards Mississauga.
It goes to Aberfoyle, I think. Am I right? Aberfoyle?
And I'm not sure, I've ridden them many times, but I'm not exactly sure where Aberfoyle starts on the map.
It's between Islington and Royal York.
Okay. So the latest extension, and I would say like that is not functioning very well. And I would say that there have been major impacts both to the small businesses along there and to the residents in the area. And that's a real frustration and a pain point. And I don't think people necessarily were well aware that that was going in. I don't think that they've been happy with the results of that. And you have to just look at the fact that the data that we're looking at is there's 35,000 vehicles that are using that corridor every single day. And when you pull out the averages, it's about 17 cyclists. And so that is just like when you take away.
So there was I'm just curious, like where does this 17 cyclists number come from?
This is the average of the study when they monitor. They do monitor how many people are riding it, and that's not to say that there's not peak periods where there's been more. There's also days when there's single digits. So you average it out on the time that they were doing the studies, and they never do the studies for I don't know what the correct term is, longitudinal study, where they're looking at this all year. They go out on specific days and there's constraints on how they look at it. But there are cameras up there and people have been looking at those numbers as well. So I would just say we do know that there is a significant pressure on the vehicles moving east-west. There's not a lot of great options right there. And you've taken away 50% of the road space and you have allocated it to what is effectively a handful, let's say double digits cyclists. And that's had a major impact. So when you're trying to balance all of the different needs, is that the best use of that finite space right now? And is there another way to do it? And I would say that you have heard loud and clear from the vast majority of residents in that part of the city that it's not working for them. And I will say when our friend Alan, I guess he was lighting me up. He was lighting me up as a politician. He doesn't like politicians.
Well, you were doing this thing, which my job actually for this hour or so is to get you off it. But politicians do tap into like this. I want to call it the talking points memo or whatever. But there is a spiel.
You will note. I have no notes or anything.
You've memorized these notes. So I'm impressed.
Good. Yeah. Well, you know what? It's not memorization if it's just the sort of common sense and you understand it. But
I fall into spiels too. But they're about like Degrassi and Tears Are Not Enough.
What I would just say is. Telling people that they are the problem because they don't ride a bike is not particularly helpful. And I think when you look at the cycling advocacy community, of which I have definitely engaged with, and like, let's remember, like I put in Danforth bike lanes, right? Like, and that was not easy. I did it in a way where I was working with the small business community over a year and a half prior, folks in different residents associations, people knew it was coming. And I would say it's not perfect and there are challenges with it, but we had something like 4,000, 4,500 cyclists using Danforth on a daily basis before we put in the bike lane. So it was the highest volume corridor of cyclists that did not have a bike lane. So it kind of makes sense to put it in there. This idea of build it and they will come, there is some truth to that, but it is not starting at zero and then all of a sudden, you know, you're having thousands of trips on a bike. So we're in a world where we're trying to balance things. This you know, utopian perspective that like, oh, like everybody just take transit or ride a bike. Well, we haven't built transit for 30 years. We don't have those options. And I'm not saying that, you know, we can't get to an end state where it is more like New York or Boston or London or Paris, but like, look how long Eglinton Crosstown has taken. It's going to be
that's an ongoing joke, except that you were talking about for the Bloor specific. Again, if I'm focusing on Bloor, it's only because that's like in my neighborhood. So
yeah,
like
and I think that's the most problematic one.
Right. But so I have just a couple of things I want to say. So a few things. One is that when you talk about Bloor, there is actually a piece of geography in this fine city I was born and raised in that has like we have TTC stations on Bloor. Like that is, if you're going to talk about a part of the city where the TTC is a viable alternative, it's Bloor Street, right? Like that is probably in the whole freaking city.
So here's the question. So why is TTC ridership down and why are people not taking it?
That's a great question, but it seems like that's where we should be exploring. Like, why is TTC ridership down? I mean,
it's less reliable and it's less safe. And for the same reason I ride a bike, you know, I'm not generally taking TTC because I know there's going to be a slowdown. I know I'm going to be kicked up to the surface, put on a bus. I know that there's going to be a security incident. That happens like equally as often as it doesn't, and that's a huge problem. The TTC is the better way. Like that's a joke, and it has been for quite a while, and it's getting worse. And so it's not just about the optionality that the subway exists or the streetcar exists. It's how reliable, how practical is it? And increasingly it seems less and less. And so I have frankly, like I said, I'm not a daily driver, but I feel bad for people who are stuck in their cars because it's never been harder to get around the city. And I also recognize, you know, my wife goes to 2-3 different construction sites every day. Like she's not riding a bike and she's not taking transit to get there. And that is just the frankly unfortunate circumstances that a lot of people in this city, the way it's been built out, that is the life that they're living. And to suggest we're in this Pollyanna universe today where, oh, just take the transit that doesn't exist, or just ride the bike 30 kilometers like you can, you know, Toronto Mike rode 13,000
But I never expect
kilometers.
people to do what I do.
No,
Like,
I know.
yeah.
That's not you.
Right.
But there are folks in the advocacy community that, you know, go out there aggressively beating the chest and just sort of say it's as simple as 1 + 1 = 2.
Right.
Well, no, there's context to all this stuff.
Sure. It depends where you're starting, where your destination is. There's a wide variety of things. So let me just say a few things here. One
I'm
is
trying to
because I don't
find
want
the
to do
photo of the bike lane.
Okay, because I don't want to do. Obviously, I'm not going to do an hour on 212 because I get bored of my own voice on this topic. Except a couple of quick little things. One is that this is not even my interest in keeping this bike lane is not for me personally because I was riding Bloor Street, the whole Bloor Street. I was riding, you know, I rode it in the 90s and I was riding it before the bike lanes and I'll ride it after the bike lanes. Like I personally, for me, I have no problem riding my bike with the cars without a bike lane, to be quite honest. I like the bike lanes. I used the Eglinton and the Royal York one yesterday and it was slick, but it's not for me. It's like, actually it's for my kids. Like I like the idea of my kids having a separated, safe bike lane when they're trying to get from A to Z. And I'm teaching my kids to use the bike first when they can to go from A to Z. So all I'll say to you as a cyclist here, and then I'm going to move on, but I know this city's bike lanes like the back of my hand, and I know I have a wonderful option right where I live, which is called the Waterfront Trail. Like that's the best. Like I use it every day, the Waterfront Trail. You know the Waterfront Trail is the best. No cars allowed. Like this is so slick. Then I mentioned I went to Mount Dennis yesterday, and I took Royal York to Eglinton. That's actually really nice. That Eglinton bike lane that I took to Weston Road from Royal York was pretty awesome. Like it's a separated bike lane. I felt safe. It was great. Even on a cold, snowy day, it was wonderful. But here's the only thing I'm going to ask you about, Brad. So put on your cycling helmet just for a moment for this one question. So, okay, because you know the geography of this city as well as anybody. But so I like the Eglinton option, okay? And I like the Lakeshore option. But I also know there's like 10K between Waterfront Trail and Eglinton. It's like 10 kilometers. So what I liked about the Bloor bike lane it was kind of in the middle. Like it was kind of like 5K north of the Waterfront Trail and like 5K south of Eglinton. And that for everybody who's not going to go 10K to get on a bike lane to go east-west, like to me, you're asking too much of citizens of the city. At least we had something between like this 10 kilometer. So what we lack now when they rip up this bike lane on Bloor if you live where I live, if you don't live on the waterfront trail like me, like, you don't have an east-west option unless you go up to Eglinton or you go down to Lakeshore. Like, there is nothing. That's too far a distance in the city to be without an east-west bike lane.
Yeah.
Like, I'm just asking you as a like, not even as a politician. I'm just asking you as a cyclist. You understand that there is no other. Like, you can't tell me there's a less vehicularly used. That's a word I've invented now. But there is no other option east-west.
Yeah, like, it's not going to be perfect. And I don't know. I can't tell you today, oh, here's the option. You go 2 blocks north and you put it in there, or 2 blocks south. And my understanding is it's not contiguous and it's not.
There's nothing.
Yeah. So, like, we're going to have to figure that out. I think it's pretty clear that this section of Bloor is had major impacts, and you're trying to balance those major impacts, and whether people like that or not. And if the objective is we have to have a bike lane on all the major arterials, east, west, north, south, then that's one perspective and that's one
Well,
view.
no one's saying that, though, right? Like, I don't think anyone's saying that. Like, we're not saying get a bike lane on Islington because we have one in Royal York.
Some people are saying that. You might not be saying that, but some people do say that, and that is a view that people have here in Toronto. But I just think that you have to try and balance it, and there is an environmental impact, there is an economic impact, there is a safety impact, and I would even say there's a productivity impact. And I'm not going to name the business specifically, but it's an organization here that is involved in the community in Toronto. They had to go out and purchase 2 additional trucks to make their deliveries as a result of the congestion, not just because of the Bloor West bike lanes, but certainly they reference the Bloor West bike lanes to deliver the same amount of product. And so there is a cost of congestion. There is a cost of traffic, and everybody, again on Twitter says, oh, like, if you're stuck in traffic, you are traffic. Like, I get it. I get the quips. I get the TED Talks, but there is an impact associated with that. And so, elected officials are trying to manage those trade-offs.
Right. It feels so political to me if I take off my bike helmet, because we both know, all 3 of us know, that when you rip up these Bloor bike lanes, it's not going to solve the traffic problem in Toronto. Like, this isn't going to fix things. We had that shitty traffic problem before the bike lanes.
So what I would say is putting in bike lanes doesn't make it better. It doesn't make it better.
No, but it makes it safer for cyclists. And it does. You say you can't just build it and they will come, but in some regard, there's a safe way for me to get to High Park from where I live, near in the Kingsway or whatever. Like, there is a option now if you chose to bike when these frigid temperatures get a little better.
Here's the crazy thing. I'm glad you mentioned High Park. Yeah. What's the street with the speed camera that everyone's always ripping up?
Parkside,
yeah. So council, in the same meeting that you're referencing, we made the decision to put a bike lane on Parkside Drive at the same time that we have closed off High Park to vehicles, and you have a direct private cycling corridor through the park, which is, I ride there. I'm one of those problematic cyclists. I ride in there, and it's a lovely place to ride.
Did you ever get a ticket for not stopping at that stop sign?
No, because
that's bullshit.
Because I stop at every stop sign.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
Get a camera on this guy, Heather.
Yeah, right. So, but point being, like, when that goes in, people are going to lose their minds. They don't know it's going in because they're not, people don't pay attention. There's only like 20 people that watch city council meetings, but we will have put in it.
But enough about Matt Elliott.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, big fan. We're taking, again, vehicle lanes away on a key connection down to Lakeshore, down to the Gardner, and putting in bike lanes right beside an area where we have dedicated, for bikes. And so that's the type of decision making, I think, that the vast majority of Torontonians, and put me in this camp, the vast majority of Torontonians want safe cycling infrastructure. They want it to be done in a thoughtful manner, but they accept that in a major metropolitan city, 3 million people, there's going to be bike lanes. We have to do that, and we have to do that in a thoughtful way. And then I think on the tailings of that bell curve, you got the folks that, as I said, want bike lanes everywhere, every north, south, east, west major arterial. And then you have the other people that are like, no bike lanes anywhere ever, which is an equally nuts position. But when you do things like what we're going to do on Parkside Drive, which I also voted against, that is where we lose the confidence and the trust of the public that we do have their best interests in mind and not the interests of a select few, which might be, the cycling lobby. And I think that makes it more difficult to do the next bike lane.
Do you think, because I bike through High Park all the time. Like, do you think part of it is that the average cyclist can't tackle that Colburn Lodge hill? Like, do you think does that have anything to do with it?
You know what? The advent of e-bikes, they're just flattening the geography. Everybody's going to be able to get up every hill.
That's Diane Sachs' secret.
Well, hey, Diane Sachs rides. She's a year-round rider as well. She's got the vest on. She's got all the kit. Good on her. It's impressive to see. However you feel about Diane Sachs, she's super smart and she's a true believer.
Well, you're talking to a big fan over here.
Oh, good.
Personally, like I was producing her podcast way before she entered politics.
I didn't. Okay. Well, yeah. I got to check out. Is this the Sachs in the City?
Well, no, I do produce that one, but there's a little backlog there. But it's called Green Economy Heroes. Okay. So basically, Diane talks to a green economy hero, somebody who's generating revenue from a business that is good for Mother Earth. It's a great show we've been doing for many, many years.
Yeah, well, she's her and I have different views on some different things, but she's no doubt brilliant and a talented individual, and she cares a great deal about her community. And this is not political BS. She actually she cares a lot, so I appreciate that.
Big Sachs head over here. Okay, so speaking of friends of mine whose podcast I produce, I wanted to bring up Dana Levinson, actually. Do you know Dana Levinson? So she was a long-time CTV Toronto personality, like for almost 20 years, I think. And I'm going to bring that up, but I promised Nick W. I would read his question here. So in my head, I hear Alan Zweig yelling at me, which is that's my Zweig complex. I'm now coining that phrase. But Nick W. just says, because I go on Blue Sky and I'm like, I've got Brad Bradford coming over. Any questions or comments? So I got a bunch of stuff, and I'm not going to read all of it because some of it uses nasty words about you, Brad. I don't like that. Yeah, I have much respect for you. Oh. But Nick W. writes in, I sure hope you put it to Brad regarding his lack of support for bike lanes. That's again, Nick W.'s words. I'm reading verbatim, okay? That's entirely motivated by his dislike of Olivia Chow. In December 2021, he spoke in support of bike lanes within context of a rapidly changing city where people are shifting and needing alternative ways to get around. This is a quote from you, I think. The way we are moving around is changing too, and we need to build the infrastructure to support that and to focus on safety, and we need to get it delivered at speed. End of quote. If it's good for his ward, what Danforth has become a much more vibrant, safer, active neighborhood should be good for all. So would you just address Nick's stuff? He's suggesting, again, I don't know how he got in your head and your heart, but you're going to speak for yourself now. He's suggesting that some of this lack of support for bike lanes is motivated by your dislike of Olivia Chow. What say you, Brad Bradford?
Well, not at all. And, I think if you're a big Olivia Chow person, you're probably pretty disappointed in her progress or lack thereof on cycling infrastructure. There's been very little accomplished, frankly. So challenge that a bit, Nick. But I appreciate the question. Look, I have done it in my community because I know my community and I listen to my community and I worked with my community to do it. And it's, again, I'm not taking a victory lap on Danforth because there are challenges with it, but we continue to work on that. We can, Main and Danforth, not to get into the details, but because there's such high pedestrian volume there crossing towards the subway and you got the Girard streetcar, we realized we needed to put in a dedicated right-hand turn bay so that vehicles can queue and people can clear the intersection. Like, this is all the sort of details that actually matter. Understanding the turning configurations, understanding the loading zones for, businesses. In fact, shout out to Ridley Funeral Home, which is difficult to sort of work into the pod, but we got a funeral home at Main and Danforth, and they have very specific loading requirements. We had to deal with that. So I made it work in my community. And I think to Nick's point where he's sort of saying, well, if it's good for you community, is it good for every community? I would actually say no. I would say Toronto is
You're saying it's not a one size fits all.
It's not. Like, Scarborough is very different. In fact, even parts of East York in my ward have more of a configuration and a layout and a geography more akin with parts of Scarborough than it does with, 18-foot lots down on the beaches. So that's the beauty of Toronto, is the diversity of the neighborhoods. And there is not a one size fits all. And I wouldn't sit as the councillor in Beaches East York and sort of proclaim to tell you how to do it. in North York or in Etobicoke, but I would listen to the people who are there. And the overwhelming feedback is what we have right now is not working. And I think elected officials should have the humility to acknowledge when we haven't gotten it right and go back and try and fix it.
And I guess to leave this for real now is that before you take the expensive and dramatic move of ripping them out, sounds so like we're ripping it out. Like, oh my goodness, you're just going to rip. We did all that work to put them in. Now we're going to rip them out. I just feel there was more time spent on proper studies and collecting, good data that would justify such a decision. And it does feel to me, as some guy sitting in his basement in South Etobicoke, like Doug Ford is throwing red meat to his base with this decision.
And you know what? I'm not going to say it's not political. Not at all. Like clearly, like very political. And I have also said, is it provincial overreach?
That's why I made that joke earlier. There's nothing.
Did I miss the joke?
Well, you did chuckle at it, but Brad Bradford, of course. Ed Keenan comes over every quarter. I don't know if you ever listened to the Ed Keenan episodes, but we kind of joke, is there anything more municipal than bike lanes? Like if you were going to write down the list of things you want your city to cover, then what you want your province to focus on, like education and healthcare, etc. And then you want the feds to worry about immigration and security and all this stuff. Bike lanes is like one of the top items I put right there. Pick up my garbage, bike lanes. This is all very municipal to me. Like why is the province overreaching? I know he wanted to be mayor, Doug Ford, but he lost that election.
Well, hey, there's a lot of people that wanted to be mayor, Mike. But not everybody gets.
But enough about Chris Sky, okay? Chris Sky, you did beat Chris Sky. I just want to put that on the public record right now. It was tight. Okay, but you mentioned Ridley Funeral Home, so real quick, I'm going to give you a measuring tape from Ridley Funeral Home, and Heather, you get a measuring tape from Ridley Funeral Home. And I will say that nice. He's a Brad too. So Brad Jones at Ridley Funeral Home is going to be here at 4:00. No, 5:00. So I got like
is everything okay?
Book. He's got a pickup here, and it might be you if Zweig's at the door. Okay, so. It's bookended by Brad's here, and I wanted him to go by Brad as well here. So we're going to leave bike lanes now.
So, Nick, I don't know if that's going to satisfy you. I suspect it's not, but, I think it matters, and how you do the bike lanes and where you do the bike lanes matters. And as a cyclist, you can probably appreciate some bike lanes are a lot shittier than others. Some are better constructed and better done and better laid out and more thoughtfully executed, and others are not. So, it's not one size fits all, and I don't think that's the right approach.
So take a note, Heather, that I use it quite a bit. The Royal York bike lane, which is really important for North-South because we don't have one on Kipling or Islington. We really need that Royal York one. It is just paint, okay? Maybe a separated, safer bike lane. I'm not sure paint is the safest. Like it's just
so
paint.
This is funny. Last night we had an event, and we might get into that. A Better City Toronto organization.
It's on my list. Don't worry.
This came up, and I referenced the Royal York bike lane as a bike lane that I have used that seems to work actually quite well coming off the Martin Goodman Trail. I have never. Yes, it's not separated, but I've never felt unsafe using the Royal York bike lane. Works pretty well.
Agreed. No, I was on it yesterday. I took it out all the way up to Eglinton. So I just feel...
And no one's saying rip out the Royal York bike.
No, I know. Actually, so my 10-year-old, we bike. Like I said, I literally my 8-year-old and I biked to school this morning. Like we bike to get to soccer practices in school all the time. And he got the headline about ripping up bike lanes, and he said to me, Dad, are they going to rip up our Birmingham bike lanes? Okay. So Birmingham is a very small street that's just a little bit north of Lakeshore, and it's got a bike lane on it. And we use it because that's where swimming is, and that's where the LCI is, and the bubble, and everything, school and everything. We use it a lot, this Birmingham. And I had to have this chat with him that, no, they're not coming for the Birmingham bike lanes. But you know what? I don't want to have to eat those words one day. But okay, Dana Levinson, this is going to change the channel here for a minute, because Dana Levinson is a friend. I produce her show. She's been very, very vocal lately about anti-Semitism that she believes is being tolerated in this city. Like she's been extremely critical of Mayor Chow, and this she talks about feeling unsafe in her own Toronto community, her and her children. And I'm just curious. I wanted to bring this up with you because I did hear you write about this. But is this city doing enough to protect its Jewish citizens and this rampant anti-Semitism that seems to be so fervent right now?
No, of course we're not. And again, back to the data, it shows that we have seen a dramatic increase in hate crimes, incidents of hate, and anti-Semitism across the Toronto. It's festered like an infection in a way that, I never thought we would see in this city, since October 7th. Mm-hmm. What has, I think, been allowed to take place is... it's really upsetting for a lot of people, and you don't have to be Jewish to be upset about that. You know,
No.
what starts with the Jews does not end with the Jews. And as we're coming off of, Holocaust Remembrance Day on Monday, and you think about the liberation of Auschwitz 80 years ago, it didn't start with death camps, right? It started with permissibility, conversations, misinformation, anti-Semitic views that were just sort of looked at and shrugged off. And I'm not trying to be dramatic about it, but let's look at what's happened here over the past 15, 16 months. You've had schools shot at 3 times because Jewish girls go there. You've had Jewish businesses firebombed, lit on fire because Jewish people own them. You have neighborhoods that are protested specifically because Jewish people live there. And that's not right. That's not right in the Canadian context. It's not right in Toronto. It's not right anywhere. And so I say what starts with the Jews doesn't end with the Jews, because it's a message and a wake-up call for all of us that this type of hate, when you are a bystander instead of an upstander, it spreads. And I think in a city as diverse as Toronto, we have to be absolutely unwavering in our condemnation, and we have to take steps to do more. And that's why I've moved motions on bubble zone legislation around places of worship, which, as Dana's probably seen, Mayor Chow worked very hard to kill that on the floor of council, which was upsetting, I think, to a lot of Torontonians. And that's why I say we can do more, because while there are limited tools, I think we have to take steps to protect people and communities that are under attack. And today that's the Jewish community, but we're also today sitting here on the anniversary of the mosque shooting in Quebec. You think about the Islamophobia that's taken place in London, that terrorist attack mowing down a family. Like, you have to be unequivocal in your condemnation, even if that for some people is politically inconvenient. It is having the moral clarity and courage to move beyond the performative politics bullshit, talking about it, but what steps can you actually do to deliver on it? And that's what I've been trying to do at council. It's been disappointing. Less folks have been willing to come with me, but we got to try.
We have to try. Toronto needs to be a safe place for everyone.
Yeah. And like, people don't feel that right now.
No.
So I think we are coming up short, and, I will continue to push the mayor and my colleagues and frankly, folks at the province and the federal government as well. I am acutely aware that as a city councillor in Beaches, East York, geopolitics is not my strength. Foreign affairs is not my business. And I'm not going to solve 1,000 years of conflict in the Middle East. But when it happens on the streets of Toronto, in this city where I am duly elected to represent people, I have to call it out. And that's what I've been doing.
All right. Kudos to you for doing that. And Dana will be glad to hear that as well.
Oh, well, happy to do it.
Mike from K-Dub writes in, a question for Mr. Bradford. See, that's respect, Mr. Bradford. Okay, you're getting lots of respect.
And K-Dub, does that mean Kitchener-Waterloo?
I think so.
Okay.
Like it's the handle on Blue Sky is Mike from K-Dub. Question for Mr. Bradford. Cities worldwide are finding that making downtown more pedestrian friendly is a cheap, effective way to improve livability. Montreal is an example, where my daughter lives right now. He sent me a link to a CBC article that was just a couple of days ago. Why won't Toronto embrace these types of initiatives and instead continue with a, what is this word? Caris King mentality? I don't know if I took that wrong. Caris. I don't know if that was a typo on his part or if I just don't understand the reference. But bottom line is, I looked at the article from CBC and took a little. So the mayor Plante, her name is going to turn a stretch of St. Catherine into a dynamic and welcoming locale. A city news release said the work would include widened sidewalks, bollards, and greenery, and it's all intended to make it more pleasant for pedestrians and encourage people to take public transit to the area instead of driving. What are your thoughts on what Montreal is up to here and what Mike from K-Dub is suggesting would be good for Toronto?
Oh, geez, I wish I had read the article. Okay. No, so
I'll send it to you.
Yeah, I'm not super familiar with that instance, and I haven't spent a ton of time in Montreal, regrettably, because I hear it's a great city. But yeah, generally speaking, like if you can create environments, main streets where people want to linger, where they want to spend time, where you have wide, generous sidewalk space, where you have seating, where you have cafes, piazzas, all that stuff, it checks all the boxes, right? And that's the stuff that you see in urban planner presentations and slide decks and TED Talks, and it's nice. how you execute it and how you deliver it matters. And so I think we should be open to considering these types of ideas. You just got to find the right place where it's going to be effective, where you can create that destination, where there is some pent-up demand for that, where it works practically, where I guess in this instance he's referencing, or
St. Catherine.
Mayor Plant is referencing where you have transit access to get there. Because again, all of this stuff only works if the options are available today or in the near term. It's not super helpful if we're talking about a universe where transit is not going to be built.
Well,
for the
it's
next
shitty to
15 years.
hear you laugh about because you're right. We grew up and it was TTC, the better way. This was the slogan. We were inundated with it, but it sucks that here we are chatting, laughing at that notion. Like, what happened?
Well, what happened? I mean, where do you start? But I might point out that we're losing $140 million a year to fare evasion, and that's like 10% of the budget. So, you know, you've got this bucket of water with a hole in the bottom, and rather than trying to plug the hole, we just keep trying to put more water in the bucket. And that sort of seems to be a theme kind of across the administration and all the different things at City Hall right now. We didn't talk about that, but I think like reliability is number one, and safety is right there with it. And right now the TTC is not reliable and it's not safe. You could talk about all door boarding on streetcars, which seemed like a good idea at the time, but obviously has led to a lot of problematic behavior. And it's not hyperbole. Like, you take the Dundas streetcar, it's not a 0% chance that you're going to see some sort of open air drug deal. And that makes a lot of people uncomfortable. There might be people who say, you know, like, grow up, harden up, whatever, but that doesn't make a comfortable transit experience for a lot of people. And I don't think they should be shouted down for saying that. The fact that the TTC has largely become like a de facto shelter system in the wintertime, not nice for anyone. And that is emblematic or systematic of all of the other issues. The fact that we have a homelessness crisis and people are taking refuge in the TTC, that's not good for anyone. You know, it doesn't make a great transit experience. And more importantly, that is certainly not a compassionate or humane response to people who have nowhere else to go.
Well, there's a shelter proposed for this very neighborhood, like 3rd and Lakeshore, 66 3rd or something. I can't remember the address, but there's a shelter proposed. I talked to Amber Morley about this very, very recently, and there's like, we're having now community, whatever it's called, when you gather and ask questions and learn about what's going on at the shelter. But I know I asked Amber about this, and she talked about the fact that we need shelters in this city for our unhoused. We need shelters. Like, what are your thoughts on these shelters that are being proposed throughout the city?
I think there's probably a better way to do it.
What is that better way?
I think you have to have these difficult conversations. And right now, politicians hide behind what we call delegated authority to staff. So we just sort of say, oh, hands off, we have nothing to do with it. There's nothing we can do about it. I don't think that's a productive way of building relationships, which is effectively what you have to do. Look, I built supportive housing, which is different, but supportive housing in East York on a parking lot, which might be similar to what's going to take place.
Yeah, well, the shelter is proposed. Yeah, right now it's a parking lot.
I literally got death threats on my phone. So that's the level of animosity that you're dealing with. It is a very live and real issue for people. And I think there's a couple factors. One, there's stigma that comes with that. Two, there's a track record at the city which would show we haven't really done a particularly good job at dealing with some of the impacts that are real that come with some of this stuff. And three, the communication is not transparent. You have to have those difficult conversations. You have to give people an opportunity to express their concerns.
But that's how, like, I literally, this guy, Mr. Davis, there's literally like, it's coming up. Like, there's everyone is invited to come to this location.
Yeah, but that's happening now,
right?
Because people went ballistic,
right?
So, and it's happening because from the city of Toronto, they come down and say, hey, FYI, this parking lot is now going to become a shelter.
Right.
And that's not really that's not a discussion. That's not a consultation. That's information sharing. That's information sharing, right? You're being told.
Right.
And there is a way to land these things, and you can do it successfully, but you have to have the right supports in place. I worked with Wood Green, who is a fantastic operator of supportive housing in the East End. And we got down in the weeds. We looked at the staffing models, like what supports are going to be there, what services are going to be providing, what is the staffing ratio,
Sure.
How often are they going to be there, where are they going to park, like all of these sort of things. And it's kind of related to the bike lane discussion. I know Alan's going to lose it if I go back to that, but it's
I don't know if you got this deep into this episode.
You have to work through the details, because the details actually matter. And I'm not surprised when residents don't have a lot of confidence in the city of Toronto's ability to execute on basic things, because we don't always do a great job. And so you can't be afraid of doing the hard work and rolling up your sleeves. But I also don't think like just telling people how it's going to be, that's not a great place to start. And understandably, people get upset about that. Notwithstanding the fact that there's a homelessness crisis. And I think everyone's going to agree we need to have housing for people to go into.
Well, but this is it, right? You just nailed it, right? Like we have encampments, right? There'll be, beside schools
They've
and
doubled.
parks.
They've doubled.
Right. So we have that. You just talked about how people are using the TTC as a shelter.
Yeah.
Right? Like, so there's a need for...
No one disputes the need.
Right.
No one disputes the need. How do you do it? How you do it matters. And I don't think that when we just sort of commandeer and take over property and say, this is going to be like this, and you don't say, well, okay, what is needed here in the community? There's homelessness all over Toronto. It's not just a downtown issue, and we're pretty far west out here in this part of Etobicoke. But same thing with East York. Like I've got another shelter actually going in at Danforth and Woodbine. Doing it, I'm shoulder to shoulder with the operators. We're going to bring that forward. But there's literally people sleeping in the bus shelter around the corner.
Right.
They're sleeping in the vestibules. It's like, if you don't think we have a homelessness problem, like go step out onto the street. It's everywhere. So it's never that people don't understand it is needed. It is how you're doing it. And so I convene community meetings with who the operator is going to be and with city staff. It was difficult, but I didn't shout people down. I didn't come from a place of moral self-righteousness like a lot of activists do. It's a conversation, and people will say things that might make folks uncomfortable. Oh, we don't want these people here.
Well, there's a lot of NIMBYism tied to shelters in the community.
Totally. Not disputing that. But I've never won an argument by telling someone how stupid they are. And I think that
go-to move.
I think you actually have to hear people out and understand where their concerns are coming from if you're going to make an honest attempt to try and address them. And if you do, and if people believe that you are honestly trying to work with them, then you can make progress. If it's all sort of moral superiority, I think you lose people and they're going to be offside.
Yeah, no arguments here. But so it sounds like you agree there's a need for shelters for unhoused, and you're just suggesting that we have proper consultations and then we do this properly. But I feel like maybe we've learned from mistakes in the past because this is proposed for 2028, I think, is when they plan to open this thing. And they're having consultations now. Like, I think that is the right way to go with this particular in my neighborhood.
That's interesting. That's like quite far away.
Yeah, I think it's 2028.
That's very far. Like, so then on the other hand, Nick W. and some of the friends of the mayor might say, geez, like you could take action a little bit faster. That sounds pretty far down the road.
But then you want it done properly with thought about supporting, because you can't, these people will need access to healthcare and there's different resources that need to be accessible to the people who will be hopefully temporarily living in these shelters. So you need to
let me give you an example.
Yeah,
so
go ahead.
Again, the supportive housing Cedarvale Trenton, it was on a parking lot. Some folks got chastised because they said the parking lot is the heart of the community. It's right next to Stan Wadlow Park, so it's actually the park. I think that's what the gentleman meant to say. But these guys don't have media training, so you go out there, you clip, you say the wrong thing, and then you're memed. In any case, there were very real practical considerations. Parking is oversubscribed in that area in terms of permit parking. The city staff are saying, oh, this is going to be staffed 24/7. Okay, well, let's follow that through. It's going to be staffed 24/7. Transit doesn't run 24/7. How are the people going to get there? You have no parking proposed, but there's going to be this complement of staff that are there all the time. Where are they going to park? Permit parking is already oversubscribed on the street. Seems like a small thing, but for the residents and the neighbors who are going to be living together there, they're already struggling with parking. You're taking away the parking lot. Parking's already subscribed, and then you're saying it's going to be staffed 24/7, but there's not transit running there 24/7 to get there. So it was a recognition of the concern. It wasn't a huge lift to be able to sort that out, But staff always take a path of least resistance when they're doing these things, and they're trying to do the bare minimum because they're stretched a million different ways, doing a million different things. And so you need the local councillor to engage with the community to problem solve some of these things. You know, I actually went out to another supportive housing site in Scarborough, you know, not something I tweeted about or anything, but went and talked to not the executive director who ran it, but talked to the frontline staff who are working in it. And unannounced, went and had those conversations. What are the challenges with the building? Well, you know, there's problems with the elevator. There's problems with the size of the kitchen. There's problems with the fact that we only have one office to deliver the services when there's a lot more space required for both the staff and the clients to be able to receive the services. So then in my building, took those lessons learned, and we adapted the floor plate to accommodate that type of feedback. So I just, like, it's not about whether or not we're going to build shelters or supportive housing. We have to. You can see it everywhere. How you do it really matters. And if you don't allow those conversations, and if you're too focused on shouting people down from the moral high ground, we just create friction and animosity.
Okay, no, good points here. Okay, so I don't even remember what we agreed on, except I'm taking a little more time. Like, you don't. You have it,
you know
Dennis?
what? You can take it up with Troy Birch.
Okay, well, let's. Troy Birch, who's hosting us on June 26th. Everybody come out to Great Lakes Brewery in South Etobicoke, June 26th, 6 to 9 p.m., TMLX 18. And just a couple more shout outs to partners that help keep this thing going. Much love to recyclemyelectronics.ca. Brad, if you have like a drawer full of old cables, I know you borrowed my cable today, but you probably have some old cables or old laptops or old electronics. Don't throw that in the trash because those chemicals end up in our landfill. Go to recyclemyelectronics.ca and find out a place near you can drop it off to be properly recycled. So take a note, Heather, recyclemyelectronics.ca.
Well, because I'm using Mike's phone cable this morning because mine conked out last night, and so my phone didn't charge. So there you go. I'll drop that cable off.
Yeah, if it's broken. If it's functional, you can keep it.
It's not working.
Is that one not working?
No, this is.
Oh, that one is. Okay,
mine
goodness gracious. I'm going to send that over to recyclemyelectronics.ca right away. Okay, and a quick much love to Nick Iones, who's the CEO of Fusion Corp Developments, and he's going to come by in the next coming weeks, and we're going to learn more about Nick Iones. He was at a TMLX event at the GLB Brew Pub at Jarvis and Queens Quay. It was good to see him there. But he condo development, he's got a great podcast called Building Toronto's Skyline, and thank you, Nick, for stepping up and helping to keep this thing going. You talked about one size not fitting all, Mr. Bradford, and Irene, I'll read this quick, and then I want to talk about ABC Toronto, and you mentioned Progress Toronto, and I want to talk about a better city Toronto. That's what ABC stands for. I learned that yesterday. But Irene wrote in and said, can you ask Brad Bradford about Olivia Chow's understanding of equitable services across the city? I live in a part of Etobicoke with ditches, culverts instead of storm sewers, and we lost mechanical leaf extraction in the name of service equity. But shouldn't our systems of stormwater be equitable too? Our ditches were quite shallow. Anyways, there's a lot of detail here for, I guess that's for Amber Morley if she's in this part of Etobicoke. But anyway, but basically, she's talking about how her 95-year-old neighbor had to clean out the litter and couldn't get out. This is terrible. She like fallen and she can't get up. But what is this we're talking about? She lost this mechanical leaf extraction because of service equity.
Yeah, well, this is, I would say, put this under a byproduct of amalgamation. And, you know, we've been a big, beautiful city for 20 years, but it wasn't all the same when we went into this.
Right.
And rightly, I think residents of Etobicoke and parts of North York and others would feel like they are paying more now and they're getting less. Like, that's actually true.
No one ever picked up my leaves. I just want to throw it out there.
Yeah, and neither, you know, in my part of Danforth, we didn't have that. But this was a service that was provided.
True.
You're paying more. You're getting less. You're not getting that anymore. And do we need to have the same services across the board? I mean, like, I guess that is sort of what it was promised when there was amalgamation. And I wasn't around at the time. I grew up in Hamilton.
98, I guess.
Yeah, but my understanding is people weren't super stoked about that. And look, I would say that's a core municipal service. You said,
like bike lanes.
For you, it's bike lanes. Yeah. But for other people, it might be like fixing potholes and repairing the roads and maybe picking up the leaves. So I think it's unfortunate that these are the types of things that end up on the the chopping board, and yet that's a service that, as we can talk about here, I guess the ditches.
Well, she's talking about something I don't even understand. Yeah, culverts and storm sewers. So maybe they need this.
The drainage in Etobicoke was done with culverts and ditches, which you might find in a more suburban context, because it was more suburban, and so that's when you have leaves in that creates problems for stormwater. I would also say it creates problems when it's over the sewer grates on the road as well, which is why you really do need to rake your leaves up. But either way, like Etobicoke is not the same as my part of Danforth, and that's not the same as like Scarborough Rouge Park.
So one size does not fit all.
No, and we should be sophisticated enough with an $18.5 billion budget, bigger than 5 provinces in the country. We should be able to figure out how to deliver the basic core services for people, and I think it's a shame that that's no longer available here in Etobicoke.
I've noticed in my cycling travels that whenever I find these streets that have this, is it called a culvert? Maybe today I learned if that's what they're called. But these ditches, they have no sidewalks, right? Like there's no. I noticed there's always sidewalks in the poorer neighborhoods. What's up with this? Have you noticed a correlation between the value of the home and the lack of sidewalk? Like the rich neighborhoods don't have sidewalks. It's like they don't want us normies walking in their hoods.
You know what? I wouldn't read into it like that. I would think it's probably more a product.
Mike's speaking for Mike over here, everybody.
Yeah, I think it's probably more a product of the frontage. So if you're dealing with 50, 60-foot lots in some of these, let's say, affluent or suburban neighborhoods, people historically have been less inclined to walk, and you could say that's a problem. We could talk about that.
Well, they take the limousine.
Right, sure, yeah.
The Cybertruck.
What was that thing that Carney had? That wasn't his, actually. That was a pretty good prank, though. That Rolls Royce limo at the.
Oh, I missed that one.
Oh, okay.
Okay, I'm trying to.
Maybe it wasn't on Blue Sky. I think it was a Twitter thing. Anyways, like I think it's probably more a product of the frontages and the lengths and the fact.
You coming to Blue Sky?
No, I'm not. I'm actually.
Your people aren't there.
No, I'm not really a social. Like I just be getting lit up by Nick W. if I was on Twitter or whatever all the time. So
well, we'll close with that. I want a couple quick hits. I want to talk about this ABC Toronto because I only read about it yesterday. But you were basically you participated in a panel discussion during the ABC Toronto's launch event. Was that yesterday?
It was last night.
Okay, tell us what ABC Toronto is, because earlier you mentioned Progress Toronto, and you gave Progress Toronto some credit for Olivia Chell's win, if I was listening correctly. But so what is a better city, Toronto, and how does that compare to Progress Toronto? Speak to this. What the heck is this?
I think you should probably have the executive director, Ariella Kimmel, jump on the pod at some point to chat more about it. But basically, in 2017, 2018, there was the formation of Progress Toronto, effectively a sort of NDP pseudo-political party at City Hall that was advocating for a certain set of policies and candidates that reflect that. And what they did was they gathered data and they collected email addresses and they trained volunteers and, they sent them out and deployed them on campaigns, and they were very effective at not winning races in 2018 and less so in 2022. But certainly by the time 7 years on, you got to 2023 in the mayoral by-election, they were a force. And I think the idea of ABC Toronto, if I understand it correctly, is there's a lot of folks across the city that, are concerned about the direction that City Hall is headed right now. The lack of prioritization, the lack of focus on affordability, safety, congestion, the issues that frankly come up at a lot of dinner tables that are not necessarily reflected in the agenda of the leadership at City Hall. So you're seeing these people come together, as I understand it, let's call it a common sense coalition. It's not a left or a right thing. It's focus on the key issues, focus on the basics, and try and make sure that Toronto is still a city that people want to live in. And I think the name A Better City Toronto speaks to that aspiration. They're not giving up on Toronto. They just want it to be better. And it will serve as a counterweight or a counterbalance to the sort of NDP Progress Toronto organization that has existed and been unchecked, frankly, for 7 years.
So if I'm going to do an analogy towards our provincial parties, we're going to the polls very soon provincially. I guess you're aware of all this. But
I'm a voter.
Yeah, you're a voter. So if we were to kind of draw a line between Progress Toronto, Progress or Progress, what do you say?
Geez, no, I don't know. I think I would say Progress.
I can't even say pasta. Heather, pasta or pasta?
It depends. Often pasta, though, I think. Pasta just sounds so...
See, I say pasta, and pasta then I get notes. Jim Cuddy from Blue Rodeo said, "Why do you say pasta? It's pasta."
It sounds fancy when you say pasta. I'm a pasta guy.
I'm a fancy guy. You know that.
Yeah,
right?
it's very fancy down
I
here.
wore my fancy hoodie today. But Progress, whatever. Progress Toronto would be aligned maybe more like you called it NDP-esque. Well, Olivia Chow was a member of the NDP party, so there's a bit of an alliance there. But a Better City Toronto, would that be more like progressive conservative-esque?
I would be really hesitant to put the municipal political lens on a PC or liberal or whatever. I think it's just actually the issue set. And you want people having discussions and focusing on the issues that matter to a lot of Torontonians, but seem to not be on the top of the agenda at City Hall. And that is like, the affordability issue is massive. It's, I don't want to get into all of the talking points on that, but like seriously, Toronto has never been more expensive, and it's everything from your grocery bill to your rent, to your mortgage, to everything in between. So it is expensive to live here, and as a result, tens of thousands of people are leaving, and those are the people, frankly, that have the jobs, are contributing to the tax base, growing the economy, taking risks. They're entrepreneurs. They're trying to build things. They're trying to create jobs. They're leaving. They're going GTHA, they're going out to Alberta, they're going south of the border. So the big risk, in my view, to Toronto and our future success and prosperity is that those economic drivers, those families, those entrepreneurs, they leave, and we are left with a concentration of people who are coming here for the services that we provide. But it's a net draw. And, you've seen this story happen in so many U.S. cities where there's a hollowing out of the middle class and the core, and you're left with like a concentration of global wealth and a concentration of poverty and nothing in between. And that's the workforce that we have to be hyper mindful of if we want to continue to have success and grow as a city.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned the affordable housing crisis because grocery bills, my wife does a lot of the grocery shopping, but I also will do a grocery shopping trip, and I'm still shocked at the difference between 5 years ago and now, like with just things like loaves of bread and milk and just these basics. And I'm always like, oh my God, like it's costing me at least twice as much for the same food than 5 years ago, like 2019 or 2020. But so I don't feel that's a Toronto thing, though. I really do feel that's not a Toronto thing. But the housing maybe speaks specifically to how do we fix this affordable housing problem? Because I have kids. I don't know how the hell they're going to own property in Toronto unless they get an extremely well-paying job.
Yeah, no, it's, there are some people that do a great job of being born into a great family, and that's nice for them. But for the rest,
talking about John Tory again? Or Doug Ford, or Justin Trudeau.
I'm just saying, like, that's not my circumstance, and I don't think that's the circumstance for a lot of people out there. So you do worry about affordability.
Sure.
And while we don't control, your grocery bill or how much it costs to put gas in the tank, or how much your new electric bike costs, we do control your tax bill, and that's the biggest bill that most people pay every year. And it's gone up 25% in the past 3 years. And I think if you ask the vast majority of Torontonians, perhaps yourself included, Mike, like, are your services 25% better? The answer is no. And that is because we don't have a culture of performance and accountability and value for money at City Hall. I want to talk about housing because that was the question.
Yeah.
Look, it's actually not that complicated. And I would say that government has been a huge part of the problem. Municipal government in particular. And as a guy that worked in the chief planner's office as an urban planner at City Hall, I saw this firsthand. 30% of the cost of a unit of housing in the city of Toronto now is taxes and fees and development charges. And that's not sustainable. The DC regime has just been this cash cow that we have always gone to, and now we've thrown everything at it. It's the kitchen sink. Your development charges actually pay for studies about development charges. And that is so far from what it started as basic core infrastructure, sewers, pipes, sidewalks, even if they were only on one side of the road. That's what DCs were about in the beginning. And so the good news is government has been a big part of the problem, but we can also be part of the solution. And that is by removing these taxes, these fees. That is by expediting the timelines, because time is money when it comes to development, getting it done faster, and we can reduce the pressure on housing costs by doing that. We can also liberalize and open up where we're going to have development. We can improve as of right zoning permissions so that you can build more housing in more neighborhoods. These are the type of practical things that are available to us right now, but instead we are pursuing what I would call is an ideological agenda where we want the city of Toronto to, quote, get back in the housing business. And I just for practical people out there, they know that government has never done something faster or for less money than the private sector. And so I think Mayor Chow is heading up, taking us in a direction where if we do deliver any quote affordable housing, it will be the most expensive affordable housing in the country's history. And that's where I see the future about collaboration and partnership with people who have the expertise and the capital to build the housing. I see affordability addressed by more supply, more options. And when I think about your kids or my kids, hopefully they're not in a position where, they don't have a great job or they're not making a lot of money and they're trying to go through programs to get access to affordable housing. But that's always been the case. And it's a question of how many hundreds of thousands of dollars of government subsidy, whether it comes from the feds, the province, or the city, that we can apply on a per door basis. That's affordable housing. It's social housing. The challenge we have is there is not housing that people can afford. And those 50,000 people that I was referencing that left the city of Toronto last year, they don't qualify for any programs. They don't get any subsidy, but they can't afford to live here. And that's why it's supply-oriented solutions that are going to correct and rebalance that. It's not like government trying to be the answer, all things to all people, and building the housing. That's actually insane. That's not going to be an effective use of hundreds of millions of dollars to yield a couple thousand units. We need to be partnering. We need to reduce the regulation. We need to liberalize our zoning permissions and get more people building faster.
Okay, so Chow came in 2023. Do I have these? Or 2023, right?
That's right.
Because she lost a year because John Tory, and that was a by-election. And that's why you were able to run for mayor and keep this gig you got right now. Okay, so we're only, now my math tells me 2026, we're back to the polls in Toronto. Brad, are you going to run again for city councillor?
Ooh, city councillor. I like what you did there. Yeah, you know what? I don't know what I'm going to do in 2026, to be honest with you. It's obvious I don't agree with the administration, right? Like, I don't think that Toronto is headed in the right direction. I think that Mayor Chow has done some good things. I think she's worked well with the province on some files. I think that, the fact that she has a hiring plan for the police right now and she's funding the police, I think that's a positive, even if her base doesn't like that. I think that's the right thing to do. And I think there have been some things on the housing file that we were able to work together on, and things from the housing action plan that I had written when I was the chair. We're seeing those come to fruition. That's positive. But there's a lot of concerns around affordability. There's a lot of concerns around safety, a lack of prioritization on key issues.
So you're running for mayor?
No. Look, honestly, and I'll just say this, there's a lot of time between now and then. Am I concerned about the direction of the city? Absolutely. Do I care about Toronto as a place where I'm raising my family and I've bet big on this city? Yeah. This is not hyperbole. Like, I care a lot. That's why I do this job. But tough to... Is that a...
It's a song.
Okay.
Yeah.
Pre-86?
Faith No More.
Oh, I don't know.
Pre-86.
Okay.
Oh, it's around 86. Actually.
Okay. Anyways, yeah. So we'll come back on the pod and we talk more about that. But no, I think that I think we should do a better job at City Hall. I think local government matters more than anything else. It's the way that people experience the things that characterize the city.
Okay, but now you're politicking again.
I'm not.
Okay, so you really don't know what you're going to do next year.
No.
You don't know if you're going to run for city council.
How many months is it?
I feel like that's close. That's close for politicians. So you haven't decided A, if you're going to run again for city councillor, but B, if you're going to run again for mayor. And I'm going to throw a C out there. Like, are you considering running, provincially or federally as an MPP or an MP?
My passion is the city. Okay. I made my profession, urban planning. It's all my life work. It's city. It's Toronto. I came to work here. That's what I wanted to do. I don't know how many months October 2026 is. My math's not so fast on that, but it is, honestly, it's a long time. I will not vote for Olivia Chow.
So. Okay,
I will not vote for Olivia Chow in 2026. But am I the best alternative? Is there somebody else? Like, I don't know what that looks like. I don't know what the political dynamic is going to be with the federal government, with the province, with the U.S. A lot of things can change.
And we might be at war by then. Who knows?
A lot of things, I hope to God that's not the case, but a lot of things can change. And so I'm going to keep pushing on the things that I think are important. I'm going to try and reflect the feedback that I hear from people all across the city every day. And I'm not going to stop swinging at City Hall between now and then.
when you have made a decision about 2026, will you drop by and make it here? I don't want you to make it with David Common on Metro Morning, or I don't know, John Moore on 1010, or my friend Greg Brady at 640. You got to do that for Heather. You got to do it here.
There's nowhere I'd rather be than in the basement with you, Mike.
Well, that's because you get Great Lakes beer when you come visit me. Okay, Brad, I don't mean to be playing you off here, except I stole a lot of time from. I said an hour. I took a lot longer, and I felt like I could do that because you were late. So I felt I had leverage there. But always enjoyed these conversations.
It's great to be with you. Big fan of the pod, and hope to see everybody out there.
And I hope to see you at TMLX 18 on June 26, 2025. Heather stuck it in your calendar.
I already did it.
What, and you're going to come too, Heather?
I might. We'll see.
She's keeping her options open.
She's so good. Hopefully she still works with me then. That's up to her.
Well, look, you might be banking on the next mayor of Toronto. This is you're in a good place.
Time will tell.
Okay, but don't. Hopefully, no. I won't even do the joke I was gonna do. I'm gonna. Sometimes I make the right call on the line of scrimmage. Sometimes I don't. And that brings us to the end of our 1,620th show. Go to TorontoMike.com for all your Toronto Mike needs. I'm on Blue Sky, Brad's favorite social media channel. I'm at TorontoMike.com over there. Much love to all who made this possible. Great Lakes Brewery. Expect a visit from the great Brad Bradford and Heather Purdon, Troy. Palma Pasta. It's good to see you at Palma's Kitchen. RecycleMyElectronics.ca. Building Toronto's Skyline, and Ridley Funeral Home. Hopefully you don't have to go there anytime soon, but they're lovely people. See you all tomorrow. An OG member, the guitarist for Spin Doctors, is going to be here. Eric Schenkman, and yes, he did co-write Two Princes. So I'm going to ask him to bring his accountant paper. I want to know how much money that makes you when you co-write a big hit like Two Princes. See you all then.